we left off with adjustments. Adjustments. There we go. What was that, like L?
Yes.
Lima. Adjustments. All right. How many adjustments does the Stromberg carburetor have?
2.
How many does the Marvel Shoveler have? 2. How many do the pressure carbs have?
2.
RSA system has only 2 adjustments. What do you think those adjustments are?
Idle speed, idle mixture.
Man, how'd you know that?
I don't know. Well, begin with left.
Idle speed. And
Idle mixture.
idle mixture. All right, so to set the idle mixture, what I'm going to want to do is get the airplane running, right? Hop out, make sure you set the parking brake. Then you want to get down there by the engine while it's running, you see? And you want to start, so while it's running, screw the mixture all the way in, then back out 1.5. Then I'm going to listen for the idle rise to go down.
No.
No?
Sounds like my first one.
It kind of does, doesn't it? Sounds like the other guys. That's my last class. That's how I'd get their orals. What the hell are you talking about? To adjust idle mixture, we do what? Now, a lot of you always start with screw it in 1.5, screw it in all the way back out 1.5.
No. That is when you initially set it.
When you initially build the carburetor, do it 1.5. If it's already on the engine, don't touch it unless you know what you're going to do. Yes, let's test it and see. Yeah. Hey, my idle mixture isn't working. Okay, well, you're a dumb pilot. I can say it. I'm a dumb pilot. Let me find out for myself. You go out there, you warm it up, you pull the idle mix out, it goes up 25 RPM and dies, and you come back in and go, seems pretty good to me. What's your problem? Well, I was reading on the internet that it should, saw on YouTube. Or, yeah. Okay. So you go out to the aircraft. By the way, this doesn't have a in and back out 1.5 because it's got that linkage on it. So don't say screw the linkage all the way together and back apart 1.5. Right? No, you screw it. Don't screw it out the other way and it falls apart. Then you got to get the master clevis, put it back together. All right. So idle mixture. You go out to the aircraft. You warm it up. Don't want to do it on a cold engine. We warm it up. Pull the red knob out. Now, I did it with somebody on their test stand, and I pulled out real super slow. I'm like, oh, do we supposed to do it real super slow? I'm like, I never thought about mentioning this. Sometimes I will go real slow, and you can watch it go up, and it'll still keep running, and, you can, and then go out. And rather than pulling it quickly, and it'll also do its thing quick. So if you didn't see it, go slow. Maybe you'll see what it's doing a little bit better. On my airplane, now that I've got the new the new floats and everything put back together, normally I could hear it, just hear rise, and the analog tack, they're kind of slow to react, but you'd see some movement. Now I don't hear it, but my digital tack shows me that it goes up and down, which is kind of weird. So you can see it on the digital, but you can't hear it. So it's not as rich as it used to be, which is fine. So, all right. So idle mixture, we're going to pull the idle mix out, and we should see a rise of 25, 50, some people say 75. There we are. So idle mixture, so a rise. Idle mixture, so rise. 25 to 50 RPM. And it just keeps running, right?
Yeah, so go up that 50 and go right back to where it was.
And then it died.
And then it died. Why did it die?
Because you cut the fuel to it.
Okay, I think you guys are getting this. Idle speed, how fast?
As fast as it should be.
Yeah. So idle mixture, can it be off and still sound really good?
Yep.
And can it be off and accelerate well?
Yep.
Absolutely. Right? What if I'm at peak? It's going to accelerate well. It's going to sound great. I can be a little bit lean at peak. Sound great, idle great, accelerate. So you can be in a pretty wide range, and it's still going to sound and operate quite well. So, but idle speed, yeah, some planes don't like to idle too slow. Some like to idle a little faster. Just kind of, what sounds right. 550 to 650. Go with the POH. That'll tell you. But yeah, I even wrote my notes. 550 to 700 here. 550 to 700. It's whatever. Pilot may like it slower. I like mine to go a little slower, so I don't have to ride the brakes. All right, those are your adjustments. What happens if you keep trying to make the idle mixture? You get no rise, and so you richen it up. You get no rise, and you richen it up, and you get no rise. And you're like, the thing is spread out, and you're at the last few threads of the little turn barrel, and you still don't get a rise. What does that tell you?
You got a leak. Leaky bushing, throttle bushing.
Is it too lean or too rich?
Too rich. Too lean.
Too lean. If it was, you never got a rise out of it.
It's dying.
So it's just dying. So it's on the lean side, just dying. So you have an air leak somewhere, or with the RSA, we talked about if one of the diaphragms is leaking fuel into the impact chamber, and that's coming through. Okay, but you got a leak, air leak, or a fuel leak. Well, if it's a fuel leak, it's going to be too rich. So if it's too lean, it's going to have to be a air leak. Where do our air leaks come from?
Throttle bushing.
Yeah, I don't think that's a big problem in the RSA, but definitely carburetor, the Marvels, yeah. So throttle bushings, what else? Missing a gasket.
Improper gasket.
Wrong gasket.
Intake manifold.
Intake manifold leak. Lycomings have pipes that are swedged into the sump.
What is swedged?
Okay, swedging is where you put a piece of metal inside, and then you have a tool that goes in there and puts a pressure around the outside, forces it out. So the smaller Lycomings, they're swedged. The most of the Lycomings, I think, with the RSA, by the time you do fuel injection, they have balanced tubes that are quite long and snake around. They're all the same because some cylinders have. You guys who've ran your engine, you have short pipes and long pipes. Those are not balanced. So a lot of the Lycomings use balanced pipes. So the ones that are where it's a very short run, they run it this way and around. So they make them really long. So you can't get a swedging tool in there, so they have O-rings. So they just go with O-rings. Those are much nicer. I like them. So you can have an O-ring link, something like that. All right, starting. So you guys have become quite the little experts here at starting engines, I think, with Marvel Sheblers and Strombergs. If not, you've become an expert at least summoning Kelly or myself to help you out.
I've gotten really good at it.
I'm not going to lie. Starting our GPU with a Stromberg, it takes a little bit of a magic touch. It's just got to have that right balance. And you got to, and hopefully you guys are thinking about it. When the throttle valve is open, it sucks no fuel whatsoever. When the throttle valve is closed, you're going to get idle fuel while you're trying to crank it. So if you give it too much prime and then you leave the throttle closed and you're cranking, it's going to suck more fuel. You have too much prime, you're sucking fuel. Then it floods. It's rich, too rich to run. That's flooding, right? So you open the throttle valve, then you get more air, and then it finds the right balance and starts to go. Then you close it, and then you're off on. Now you're running on your idle, right? So it's kind of the thing there. With the Marvel Shebler, especially if you had the one with the accelerator pump, you can just kind of give it some pumps while you're cranking it, squirt some fuel in there, yeah? All right, so the RSA, the fuel injection systems, both of them, they don't have a primer system. So you have a primer system in your Bonanza? I think you do.
Well, I'm supposed to. I'm having a Bonanza. I apologize. What happened? It had an electric primer system on it originally.
Yeah.
The mechanic took it off many years ago because it said he had air leaks in it apparently.
Yeah, it does happen. With the exception, and I don't know why, our Skymasters, when I say Skymaster, I'm talking about, right? The engine in the front, engine in the back.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They have their fuel injection systems with primers. They're the easiest airplanes in the world to start. I love those things. All right, but for the most part, engines, aircraft with fuel injection, they don't have primer systems. Engines with fuel injection. E-I-J-E-C-T-I-O. I'm having a problem there with my pen. In systems. systems typically do not have primers. And I would say the reason why is because you've used the primer port for the injection nozzles. Like my 470, which is an O470, which tells you it has the O part. No, I'm sorry. But it has no fuel injection. It's carbureted. Because it's not an IO 470. It's an O 470. So it's got a carburetor. But you look on top of my engine, and I've got a manifold valve with 6 lines going in and 1 coming in. So now what are you thinking?
Primer.
Everybody says, what is this, fuel injected? It's a primer system. That's all it is. And so it's got 6 primers, and they go to the nozzles that look a lot like fuel injection nozzles. But now if I did have a fuel injection, I couldn't have those nozzles on because that's where the fuel injectors go. So you'd have to go into different spots. They usually don't have them. And once you understand how they work, which you do now, you've got, well, I can just see how I could just run some fuel in the nozzles, which are right by the cylinders. It's the same thing as priming, so there you go. All right, so the engine is primed with the fuel injection system. INJ SYS, fuel injection system. And so this is funny, I was listening to one of those podcasts that I always tell you guys I was listening to. And it was about a Cirrus, and the guy stopped and he said, something about starting your Cirrus. And they got off on this tangent about starting Cirruses. And it was beautifully said because the guy explained he's like, how do you start a Cirrus? He goes, however it starts. And so they got on this thing about how his Cirrus starts when he does it exactly this way. But that doesn't work for the one that his buddy has that is exactly the same as his. He has to start his this way, which does not work for this guy. And you will see that starting with small planes, okay, like the Taylorcraft across the street, purple and white one, that does not have a starter. So it has a Stromberg on it. So you have to hand prop it with the Stromberg. And boy, you see some of these older guys, he's not an older guy, but they've had their planes for a long time, they will tell you exactly how. I mean, they have a recipe. Here's what you do. You go to the airplane, you pull it through with the throttle closed 5 times. Then you open the throttle a 1/4 of an inch, pull it through once. Then you pull the throttle back to this, you put it on the left mag, and you pull it through once, and it'll start every time. And they'll do it, and man, they'll leave you with the airplane, you're like, whatever. And you skip on those steps, you'll be fighting it for 20 minutes. This won't start, what was his recipe again? It's just weird, So when I tell you kind of how I started, this is, I'm used to getting into all these different planes as a mechanic, and you've got to start them all, and you don't have this recipe. See? So in a sense, what I do is you have to be very, very careful. You cannot you can't hydraulic lock it, right? Then you bought an engine. So what I tend to do is
Customer started?
they're not around. No, you can start it. It's not hard. So you have to prime it off the fuel system. So what I do is I bring the mixture all the way up, because it's always back and idle cutoff when you get the airplane. Bring the mixture up, I bring the throttles up, and hit the boost pump. Now, Continentals have a high and a low, but Lycomings just have 1 speed. So hit the boost pump, and you watch the fuel flow gauge, which is a pressure gauge. And I'm going to watch it come up, and I don't wait for it to come up and stabilize. I wait. As soon as it starts to get some movement and it gives me, absolute positive movement, I stop the pump. And then usually I'll then I'll pull the mixture back so no more fuel gets to the engine, right? Because I fear of hydraulic locking when this thing. So I'll pull the mixture back, shut off all the fuel. So in theory, I've got fuel was spraying out of the nozzles because enough fuel went up to the manifold to run to my pressure gauge, therefore it probably, and I left it on for, let me see, we'll go, ready, boost pump. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm off. So 5 seconds, I'm out, right? So I've got some fuel, idle cutoff. It's very important because as you're cranking the engine, you're running the pumps, right? Or the, whichever system you have. So if it's not starting, you're still pumping a bunch of fuel. And I'll leave the throttle all the way open, wide open throttle. So idle cutoff, wide open throttle. I'll hit the starter and pull the throttle right back as I'm hitting the starter. And so you're going from way too much air to just enough air. Somewhere in there is just enough air, it catches, boom. Then you move over, bring it back to idle and mixture up as fast as you can. It works almost every time.
So you're saying that you're pulling the throttle back
As I'm turning it, as I'm cranking it.
Closing the air flies or cranking.
So I got too much air, and I'm bringing it back through too much air back towards idle. And it almost usually catches somewhere in there just fine. Now, every now and then you get like our 310 is the hardest aircraft I've ever had to start. It is horrible. It's because the fuel injection system is so messed up and it doesn't want to flow. The only way I can get that thing to run is actually to hit the boost pump with the throttle open, with the mixture forward while I'm cranking it. Because it takes so much fuel that if you were to wait until you got enough, it's like so long. Like there's no way this isn't going to hydraulic lock. So I hit the boost pump and then turn it and go at the same time. So I'm not going to write all this. Place it through, yeah. Hopefully, you guys finish your projects, and one of the last projects that I want to do with you guys, and this is the fun one, is we'll either use the 310 or the Skymaster or the Bonanza, or all of them, and I'll take you out 3, 4 at a time. No, 2 to 3 at a time, because I have to go. And we'll actually take the Bonanza and we'll go out, we'll run it up, because it's got a constant speed prop, it's got at least a pressure carb, or we'll use the 310, which is a lot of fun. It's up so high. And we'll run that. I'll show you how to run fuel injection. We can even feather the props and stuff. So, all right. Venting. That's what I do every time I walk in here. Okay, so systems that use fuel pumps must have proper tank venting. Well, every aircraft has to have proper tank venting. So in a gravity feed system, if my on Cessnas, in fact, there was an airworthiness directive on this 150s, and the way they vented is you got the wing tanks, and how did it go? So the right tank had a line that went across the top of the cabin to the left tank, and the left tank then had a line going out to the wing strut where it vented there. And they found that that was a real problem. And there was one vented cap. I think they put a vented cap on the right side, and they found out that you had to have 2 vented caps. So Cessna 150 has 3 vents. Right cap, left cap, wing vent. All right, and so if in a gravity feed system, if you don't have proper venting, your fuel just stops. But I've talked to people in low wing airplanes because low wing you have to have a fuel pump, you have to have one. And I've talked to people who've had the vents plugged and they've looked out and their fuel tank is just collapsing. So the whole wing is distorted, it's collapsing, like, whoa, look at that crap. You know, they get down the ground and pow, and the thing pops out kind of straight again. It's like, so the pump will fight that for as long as it can and then it'll stop.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so venting, well, I'll just put, you must have proper venting, you must. That's why I have a high wing airplane. I don't want to see that crap. That scares me.
Hey, you can't see it, it's not happening.
That's right. If just like my oil loss, you can't see it. It's not.
Yeah,
All right.
still have oil.
If a tank vent is blocked, the fuel pump can collapse the tank, and eventually starve the engine. Of fuel.